I'm Vilma Bim. Welcome back to the command line. I'm one of the engineers on the GitHub CLI team, and today I wanted to talk about some enhancements to the extension support in GH, as well as introduce a library that we've just recently open sourced. So if you're unfamiliar, the extension system is new to GH, and it allows you to add new commands to GH to extend its functionality. So you can write your own commands, you can publish them, you can install other people's commands, and the point of this system is to give you flexibility beyond a basic alias. So GH has had alias support for a long time, but these extensions are whole programs. They can do all sorts of complicated things and have more complex logic, can be tracked in their own repository, and up to now, they had to be written in an interpreted language. So an extension was just a Git repo, and your extension was an executable script. Most extensions are in Bash, because that's on most every computer. But you could write them in Python, you could write them in Ruby, but your extension functioning depended on your users having the right interpreter installed. So if they didn't have the right version of Python for your extension, then your extension doesn't work. So we wanted to address that by adding support for precompiled extensions. So now, if we look at the help for GH extension create, we have support for this precompiled setting. So right now, we can help you get started making new extensions in Go. That's kind of the first class experience, but we will also help you with extensions in other precompiled languages like Rust or C, or Haskell, I guess, if you're into that. But for now, we're going to run through a demo of using GH to create a new Go extension. So to start, we're just going to run extension create with no arguments. This now starts a wizard that is going to ask us some questions about our new extension. And what we're going to do is make a very simple extension that just lists out recent mentions for the currently authenticated user. So we'll call it that. And as far as what kind of extension, this first option is previously all we had. We just had these interpreted extensions like I was talking about. You can create one in Go, or you can do other precompiled. So we're going to select Go. And GH is going to do a number of things for us. Creates a new directory, creates a new Git repo in that directory, sets up some scaffolding, downloads the initial Go dependencies required, and builds a binary for us so that we can immediately demonstrate that it's working. So we'll follow this advice here and do a local install. So GH extension install dot is going to install our in development extension so that we can invoke it via GH. So once we've locally installed it, we can run GH mentions. So it outputs its name, and it looks like it's doing something with the API, and this is just boilerplate code. So obviously we're going to want to update this so that it does what we want, but this is a good time to commit. So let's go ahead and make some modifications. So you'll note here that we are importing this CLI/GoGH library. This is the new library that I mentioned. It's a new project from our team that you can think of as a miniaturized version of GH. The goal of the library is to make writing extensions much easier by allowing you to take advantage of some of the features that are in GH very conveniently. The most notable thing that it can do is pick up your configuration for GH. So if you already have GH installed and you've authenticated it, then you can write Go code that imports GoGH and say creates a REST client. This will talk to the GitHub REST API and just configure itself automatically based on whatever you've been doing with GH. It does some more stuff, and we'll look at that later on. But for right now, we want to make our extension do some stuff. So first, make a new struct to store notifications in. Still want to create our client. And this is going to be something different now. And we're going to use a different endpoint. So we were calling the user endpoint of the REST API. Now we're going to call notifications. Still want our error checking. And so now we're going to get a list of JSON objects here in response. So we'll iterate over that. And notification.reason mention, then print it out. So let's test this and see if it works. And to test it, I'm going to run go build. So go build will recreate the binary gh-mentions. And because we've installed this locally, we can just run gh-mentions and it will pick up our new binary. Gh knows to look in your source directory for that binary. So as you're working, just do go build and then run gh-mentions and you'll see your changes. So looks like it worked. We got some subjects, we got some URLs. Cool. So we could continue and make it a more friendly UI, but we're just going to go ahead and publish this so that other people can use it. First, I'm going to remove our local version. I would typically keep that around to keep developing on it, but I want to demonstrate what it's like as an end user to install your new extension. So we'll start by removing mentions. And we'll commit our new functionality. And we haven't actually made a repo on GitHub yet. That's not something that GH extension create does for you because we want you to publish it when you're ready. So we will use GH repo create. And I wanted to shout this out. This is also a new feature in our latest release. Major shout out to Parth and Micah, two folks that rewrote repo create for us. So it's a lot more clear and explicit what it's doing. I really like it, and we're going to tell repo create that we already have a local repository and we want to push it to GitHub. The path to the repository is current directory. We want to use the name gh-mentions. Extension, make it public. Do you want a remote? I want to be called origin. And yes, I would like to push commits. Thank you, GH. So now that we have a repository, we get to take advantage of something that GH extension create laid out for us. Let's take a look at this workflow file that came from GH extension create. It responds to tags that start with V, and it's going to check out our extension, and then it's going to use this gh-extension-precompile action. That action is going to compile our extension for a number of target platforms and create a release with all of those compiled binaries in it as assets. And once that release exists, users can install our new extension. So what that means is that we need to actually create the tag first, push that up, and now we should see the run going. So there it is in progress. All right, so that's going to go, and we could sit here and stare at run watch. I think I'm more in the mood to maybe watch something entertaining. So while that's going, why don't we watch a screensaver? Yeah. Nice and soothing. Oh, drink some water too. Highly recommend drinking water. I find these very soothing. You know, we can watch some other ones actually. Let's see, as long as this action is running. Let's see. Game of life. Yeah. Excellent. Our action is still running, and in our action's defense, it's compiling, I think for like 6 different platforms, Windows and Linux and Mac, and then different architectures on each of those. Let's see if we get a different rule set on life. Yeah, we're getting that one. Oh, there's a new one. And you know, this is kind of, we're using the GH screensaver extension as designed. It's a nice way to pass the time when you're waiting for runs to complete. I mean, I could be scrolling Twitter, but I just find this a lot more satisfying than that. We're still waiting. Hey, it's done. So now that we've put our repository on GitHub, we committed, we pushed, we tagged, and the workflow has run, and so now we have a release. That means that when we run extension install, GH will look for the correct asset out of the attached assets to the 1.0 release and install it for us. So now I'll install, not from local, but from vim/gh mentions. And we get the output that we expect. So hopefully this will help you get going with extensions and give you more power and flexibility in what you can do with them. I do want to show off really quickly that we do our best to help you if you want to work without Go. So we'll run extension create again, call this one mentions 2. We'll select other precompiled this time. We're not going to go through the whole process again, but I wanted to point out that GH gives you this build.sh script to add to, and it also configures the workflow a little bit differently. So you still have that nice build and release automation, but now we're telling the GH extension precompile action, hey, don't just run go build and do all that cross compilation via Go, but call script/build.sh. So now it's your task to fill in script/build.sh and tell it how to build your code. So for example, if we did something in C like this, then we would want script/build.sh to look something like this. The extension or the action looks for compiled binaries in a dist folder, so we'll make that first. We'll run gcc on main.c, and we want to put that binary here, and because we're on Mac, we'll label that AMD, Darwin AMD 64. So theoretically, this will work. So we have a dist directory, and there it goes. So by filling in script/build.sh, if I push this and I tagged it, the action would create a release and upload everything in this dist file. So again, you have to do more of the work yourself if you're not using Go, but hopefully that helps take some of the burden off of you when you're authoring extensions. So I wanted to show off last this new library. It's called Gogh. It's under the CLI org. We are considering this a beta release, and we are welcoming feedback either via discussions or a feedback issue on the main CLI repo. We want to know what you think, and we want to know if it's useful, what other features it might have to make it easier to author extensions for GH. Right now, what Gogh exposes are a few things to help you. It exposes this helper exec. So gh.exec is here to shell out to an existing GH binary. So if you have GH installed on your system, or on a the same system that your extension is running on, and you use gh.exec, it will use that existing binary. And this is useful if you want to wrap some of the richer UI-based features in GH, so like issue list or anything that you wanted. But you don't have very fine-tuned control over what you're doing. You're just calling GH commands and then you get the output. The other ways of interacting with GH are the REST client, like I showed off before. You can explicitly configure it with authentication information. If you just pass nil, like we did, then it will pick up configuration from GH's config. And we also, to go along with the REST client, we also expose the GQL client. So you can create structured GraphQL queries, create variable mappings, and execute those via our GraphQL client. And finally, we expose this helper gh.current repository. This reproduces the logic that we use in GH to figure out what GitHub repository a local repository is connected to. So it looks at remotes, it queries GitHub, and it tells you, hey, if the user's in this local directory, then they're most likely interacting. They want to interact with this remote repository on GitHub. So we use this in all of our commands pretty much to establish that context of, if you an issue list, where does issue list query? That's all now exposed for you via current repository for your extensions. So yeah, let us know both what you want to see it do, what you like about it, and what you make with it. Remember, if you're looking for extensions to install, you can go to topics/gh-extension on github.com, and this will list out all of the extensions that people have authored. There's a lot of really neat stuff in here. There's our screensaver, and I strongly encourage you to put something up here. We're really excited to see what you make. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.